As I was reading the Bible this week, this psalm just jumped out to me, and I've never looked at it the way I looked at it this time. But it meant a lot to me, and I pray throughout the week that God will lay a message on my heart that is not something that I'm going through necessarily, but something somebody's going through that he wants to give to somebody. I don't want it to be my message, I want it to be his message. I don't want you to hear my words, I want you to hear his word. And this week I was praying, God, go ahead and give me a message, and I ran into this really small psalm, and we're going to read the whole thing today, because it's really not that long. But there was a lot of power in this thing. So I'm gonna start this thing off with a quiz. It's a really short quiz. You should know the answer to it. Chances are you'll mess it up, but we're gonna do it anyway. Here's the question. Does anyone know the answer to this question? What are you supposed to do if life gives you lemons? Make lemonade. That's what you're supposed to do. Well, that used to be the right answer, but now it's not. It's not the right answer anymore. So everyone that just said make lemonade, you failed that small quiz. The answer has changed. Now we live in a time where the answer is a little different. The answer is now, unless God gives you sugar and water, you're going to have horrible lemonade. If life just gives you lemons. It used to be that people would use what they had and they made things work. Now, we live in a society where we're more negatively wired. You just look around and it's a more negative society. You turn on the news, very rarely do they talk about something that happened that we're celebrating, unless it's a parade or something that we're celebrating. But even in that, they can pull some negative into it and just, season it with a little bit of negativity. We are wired negatively as a society these days. The last 2 to 3 years haven't done our culture any favors at all. You look back 2-3 years and we've been hit pretty hard. There's larger groups now that fear things that they've never feared before, or they've adapted fears that they never worried about previous, but now we worry about things we never even considered before. It's accepted that a person's identity can be determined by an individual's feelings, and because feelings don't bring value, they have lost a sense of value, and that adds to that depression and that negativity. We are conditioned to worry about an economy. We're conditioned to worry about our health. We're conditioned to worry about the way other people see us on social media. Did you get enough likes? Did you get enough followers? Are people even watching? I made breakfast, I took a picture of it, I put it on there, and nobody cares. And it hits people hard because we're wired we want recognition. We want that from other people. We're producing more antidepressants and anxiety pills than ever before. We have a culture that's wired negatively now. We can be depressed really fast. We've been sabotaged. If you look back, you look in the past, you don't see all of these problems that we have now. We are wired negatively. We are conditioned to go to the negative. The sun comes out like, oh great, I'm going to get a sunburn. No, it's a good day. It's a good day. But we go towards the negative. We naturally flow that way, where that's not the way it used to be. The enemy has come in and convinced us to place our priorities where they don't belong. So how do we get out of that mindset? And as a culture, I'm talking about as a culture, I'm not talking about anybody in particular, but as a culture, just look at our society, you can see that we're more negative driven than ever before. We're leaning that way. So how do you get out of that mindset? I want to remind everyone of a 17-year-old boy that killed a giant with a rock. Let's just go right back to that moment in history. This kid gets out there and he kills a giant with a rock. Everyone else saw Goliath as unbeatable, and David saw him as an over-advertised problem. That's all David saw him as. Okay, you made this problem bigger than it really is. He's an over-advertised problem. He's huge. He's armored. He's trained in battle. Yeah, see, you're over-advertising this. He's a man. He's a man. And he's an enemy of God. Have you seen the size of our God? Goliath is an over-advertised problem. This is his response to Goliath's threat. Look at 1 Samuel 17 and verse 46. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. A little bit arrogant there, young man. You know, like, what? You're 17 years old and you're going to do what? Like, that's what I'm going to do. He doesn't have a sword in his hand. He doesn't have anything except for a slingshot. And he doesn't say, I'm going to throw a rock at you and you're going to fall. He says, no, I'm taking your head off. That's kind of a big threat there. You don't even have a sword. I'll use his. But I'm going to take him down. He has confidence. David's attitude was that God will be seen as greater than any problem, no matter how big that problem is. God will be seen as greater than that issue. David, that was his mindset. That was his goal. Let the world know that there is a God in Israel. I'm cutting off your head today. With what? I guess your sword. But my God is bigger than this problem. You are an over-advertised issue, and God cannot be advertised enough. That was David's attitude going in. The nation of Israel started following David before he was even king. They loved this kid. He just came onto the scene and they're like, all right, this guy's got something. We like him. They loved his confidence and they loved his faith in God. Eventually, King Saul develops a jealousy over this young man because, well, they like David. Nobody's following Saul. I mean, he's the king, but they're just waiting for his term to be over because they're waiting for David. Now Saul is jealous. David ends up being hunted down by Saul and is forced to hide in caves. Because Saul's trying to kill him, he has to hide. The passage I want to use is actually a psalm that David wrote while he was hiding in those caves. David, the guy who lives in honor among the people, among the nation of Israel, is now hiding in a cave, and he is depressed. What happened to the kid that says, I'm going to cut your head off? What happened to that guy? I'm hiding in a cave now, completely bummed out. And God inspires him to write a psalm. So look at Psalms 142, starting in verse 1. A contemplation of David, a prayer when he was in the cave. I cry out to the Lord with my voice. With my voice to the Lord I make my supplication. I pour out my complaint before him. I declare before him my trouble. David is not experiencing a time of praise right now. This isn't one of those psalms where you look at it and go, his mercy endures forever, his mercy endures forever, his mercy endures forever. Let the world sing, let the world rejoice. That's not what he's writing in this psalm. He is not praising God here. He's running for his life. He's separated from his family. He's hiding in a cave. People are trying to kill him. He's not in one of those woohoo moments. That's not where David's sitting here. While he's hiding, God inspires him to write this psalm that people would be reading thousands of years later. We're reading it today. But God inspires him to write this psalm while he's depressed in this cave. God wants this experience recorded in the Bible for some reason. David says, I am so depressed. And God says, tell me about it. And write it down, please. Let's record this one. Why do you want anybody to know about my depression? This is a big moment, David. Record your devastation. Go ahead and write it down. God wants us to see something and he wants us to grow from it. Otherwise, God wouldn't have inspired David to record this. But God wants David to write this down. A lot of times when we read passages of the Bible, we try to find a way that they connect to our lives. This one's a no-brainer. This one hits home immediately. Bummed out? Been there. Been there. We don't have to dig for this one. Does this connect to us? Absolutely. You don't even have to know what this psalm's about. You just go up to, so what are we reading today? Oh, something about depression. Okay, I get it. We haven't even read it yet. No, I'm already connecting. I've been there before. You could be going through it right now, but you connect. David's crying out to the Lord because he's in a very depressing situation. And it's not just that things aren't going his way. People are trying to kill him. So it's not just he didn't get the flavor of the store was out of the ice cream that he wanted, and now I'm all bummed out. No, this is deeper. It's not things aren't going his way, it's that people are hunting him and trying to kill him. Look at verse 3. When my spirit was overwhelmed within me, then you knew my path. In the way in which I walk, they have secretly set a snare for me. David had an enemy that was doing everything he could to take David down. He wants to kill David. He wants him out of his way. People like David more than they like me. Saul was not getting the follows and the likes on Facebook that he was hoping for. David was getting all of those, and now Saul is depressed because I don't have the following that this little kid has. I want what he has, and he's jealous. So he's hunting him down to kill him. Now, God had already told David that he was going to be the king. God told David in advance, I've chosen you to be king. You are the king. God has already established that Israel's next king was going to be this young man. He's promised him a position and a title. But David is currently running for his life. That's his scenario right now. He's currently running for his life. Everywhere he goes, the enemy set a snare to catch him. And it's discouraging. He has a fairly large group of people who don't believe in him. He feels alone and he feels unacceptable. David's depressed. This psalm is the moment where David says, I'm just going to write about it. I'm completely bummed out, God. And God's like, that's awesome. Record that. Let's talk about your depression. But he's not just depressed. David goes in and explains his situation on a deeper level. Look at verse 4. Look on my right hand and see, for there is no one who acknowledges me. Refuge has failed me. No one cares for my soul. Those are some pretty big statements right there. They're not true statements, but they are true feelings. They are real feelings that he's going through. They're not true statements, but it is a reality in David's life. He's really experiencing this right now. David has found himself in a dark place in life. He feels lonely. He's lost his sense of security. He doesn't even feel like anyone cares for his soul. Okay, that's a really depressing statement. No one cares for my soul. So you're not happy? No, that's a devastating statement. Don't forget, God is inspiring David to write all of this. Keep writing. I want you to record this. David's pouring out his devastated heart to God, and God is helping him express how overwhelmed he actually feels. God, I'm really depressed. Let me help you say that better. Let me inspire you to say it. Let's talk about how depressed are you? No one cares for my soul. That's good. That's good. Write that down. God's inspiring him to record this thing. God wants us to make a connection with this psalm. He wants us to make a connection here. We've all been bummed out. That happens to every one of us. You could be bummed out right now. It happens to all of us. Things don't go our way. Our feelings get hurt. Sometimes we feel rejected. This happens. But David isn't talking about having one of these bad days. He's depressed in his soul. This is a deep depression that he's going through. He's not just disappointed, he's broken. No one cares for my soul. I'm hurt deeper than just my feelings. I'm hurt to the soul. I am so depressed. That's a deep hurt. That is a really deep hurt. It's like no matter how good of times you're in, you're still depressed. Life, there could be celebration all around you, and you're still depressed. All the blessings could come. Look at all the good things, and you're like, yeah, that's great. I'm still depressed. It's not just my feelings, it's my soul. I'm suffering with a deep, deep depression. Now, if we just step back for a minute, we would see the bigger picture here. Saul has a son, Jonathan. That's David's best friend. And he loves David. That's a reality. David has a family who loves him and longs to see him. And before David started running from Saul, the people of Israel were chanting, Saul has killed his thousands, David has killed his 10,000s. David has adoring fans out there. And then David says, no one acknowledges me, no one cares for my soul. Right? But aren't those things true? Is Jonathan still your best friend? Yes. Are they excited about you being king? Yes. Do you have a family that loves you? Yes. So what do you have to say about that? No one acknowledges me, and no one cares for my soul. Okay, you're in a dark place, sir. You're in a very, very dark place. God is allowing David to speak from his heart. All of these things are true. So what's this nonsense about no one acknowledging you or caring for your soul? David is crushed by his circumstances, and every time he considers his situation, he's devastated all over again. He's just stuck in a rut. He's just devastated. But that's only the first half of the psalm. As he's filling out his complaint card to God, he's just sitting there writing this stuff. As he's filling out his complaint card to God, he takes a minute and he thinks about the person he's talking to. God, here's my complaint. And then he realizes who he's talking to. Okay, I'm talking to God here. This is when he starts to see where the problem lies. Okay, I'm starting to understand something here. Look at verse 5. I cried out to you, O Lord. I said, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Now things are turning around. David takes a breath and he announces truth instead of feelings. He starts declaring the truth instead of how he's feeling here. God, you are my refuge. You are my refuge. You are my security. You are the place where my hope and my trust find shelter. You are my refuge. And then he says that God is his portion in the land of the living. And I wish more people could understand this. You are my portion in the land of the living. God isn't just somebody that you're going to meet when you die. He is involved in your life right now. Right now. David says, you are my refuge and you are my portion in the land of the living. God is your inheritance in the land of the living right now. You don't have to wait to get this. You've got him right now. When everyone else walks away, God's still there. When you're hiding in a cave and people are trying to kill you, God's still there. When you're going through devastating times in your life, God is still there. And David says, okay, I've told you about my feelings. No one cares for my soul. And now I need to talk about truth instead of feelings. You are my refuge, and you are my portion in the land of the living. David's trying very hard to change his mindset in the middle of his depression here. God is a safe place to put my trust, and he's with me always. That's the truth. I may not be feeling it right now, but that's the truth. After David speaks the truth about God, he finds himself in a position to ask God for help. It's really, really, really difficult to ask God for help when you feel like even God doesn't care for your soul. No one cares for my soul. You don't ask him for help when you feel like God doesn't even care. David was in a place where he could say, no one cares for my soul. And then he starts speaking truth. Hold on, you are my refuge. You are my portion in the land of the living. So now I can ask you for help because you do care for my soul, and I understand that. So David speaks reality, and then he leans on God as a friend. Look at verse 6. Attend to my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are stronger than I. I want you to notice that just get over it is not the strategy that David uses here. Sometimes we've got those good friends that come up to us, I'm so depressed, get over it. Well, now it's all better. That's not going to help anybody. Just get over it. I'm depressed, stop being depressed. Well, that was magical. I'm suddenly not depressed anymore. That was great advice. It doesn't ever work like that. Just get over it is not the strategy he's using here. He's still hiding. He's still a fugitive. He's just handling it with maturity and trusting God now. The problem hasn't gone away just because David's choosing to focus on God. He still has enemies who are trying to kill him, and they are still stronger than he is. He's still going through this. Depressed or not depressed, this is still the reality. So he changes his mindset. Did the problem go away? Nope. Problem's still there. It's still there. When you're under a financial burden or in the middle of a health crisis, the issue isn't resolved because you change your focus. Let's just look at things positive. Oh, look at that. My health problems all went away. No, they're still there. The problems are still there. Finances, they must be much better because I decide to look on it positively. I'm still broke. I'm just looking at it different, but I'm still broke. The problem doesn't change because you look at it differently. What gets resolved is your depression, not your issue. Money's still not in the bank. Your health is still not, you're not cured, but your depression's on a better road now. Remember how Joseph was in an Egyptian prison for 3 years back in the book of Genesis? He was stuck in this prison for 3 years. He was forgotten about. Initially, he was rejected by his own brothers and sold into slavery. That's how he got into the Egyptian prison in the first place. His own family turned their back on him. He was thrown into prison because he was accused of doing something he didn't do. Talk about a recipe for depression. Yeah, my family rejected me, sold me into slavery. I started doing a good job. I didn't do anything wrong. I got accused of doing something wrong. Now I'm in prison. I talked to another prisoner, and he got freed. And I said, hey, don't forget me when you get out. Tell him I'm here, and I need to get out. And the prisoner leaves and forgets about him for 3 years. Like, all right. That's depressing. That's depressing. He was powerless to reverse his situation, and he wasn't even given the opportunity to defend himself. He can't do anything about it. He's just stuck. This poor guy was forced to sit alone in his thoughts. This is a place where depression likes to kick up its feet and make itself at home. Go ahead and get stuck in your thoughts. Depression's like, now we're living. This is what I'm looking for. Get stuck in your thoughts. Depression makes itself at home there. If you think about it, David was in the same situation Joseph was in. He was rejected by his own people. Saul in particular. It was the same group of people. He was treated like a criminal when he wasn't one. And now he's sitting in prison in the form of a cave, but he's still sitting in prison. Joseph successfully made it through this chapter of his life, so what's David supposed to do? Joseph made it through. When Joseph runs into his brothers years later, decades after they sell him into slavery, he responds to them like this. Look at Genesis 50 and verse 20. But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. That's a good attitude. Yeah, hey, don't worry about it. You meant evil against me, but God flipped that thing around, and he meant it for good. So we're good. That's quite a stand there. That he made it through, and he did it successfully. I'm just going to go on record as saying, if Joseph's story happened to me, I think despair might be a location that I might pull over and sit in for a little bit. Oh, my family sold me, and now I'm in prison, and people have forgotten me, and I get to sit here in my own thoughts. I'm going to be bummed out. Like, oh, don't be bummed out. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to be bummed out. Joseph might have been bummed out too, but it doesn't record it if he was. But I'm sure he got depressed. But either way, he didn't stay there. He didn't stay there. He came out on top. How did he do it? How did he get out of that situation? How are we supposed to do it? You go to the root of the problem. You've got to go to the root of the problem. Counselors will usually try to help a person solve their problem by addressing the cause of the problem rather than the problem itself. They don't want to talk about your problem. They want to dig a little deeper and find out what the cause of the problem was. If you're constantly out of money, it might be because you have a spending habit problem, not because your money's just dissolving. You know, like, oh, I think I have money, and then it's not there. I think it's dissolving. No, there might be a deeper issue here. Yeah, it might be a spending habit. That might be your problem. So we don't focus on the problem. We look a little deeper to the cause. So we can come back and fix the problem if we go to the cause. David realized that his external problems were the fact that he was being hunted down. That's my external problem. That is what's happening in reality around me. He was basically being held in prison for something he did not do. There was no denying that he has a good-sized problem on his hands. Okay, that's the external problem. That's what's going on the outside, and it is a big problem. But David had another problem. It was a deeper prison. It was a lot deeper prison. The cave was the external problem. But there's a deeper prison. And yes, for the protection of his own life, he had to stay in a cave. But David's external problems weren't all that he had. David was dealing with internal struggles too. I have a problem on the inside, not just a problem on the outside. After he asked God to protect him from his persecutors, the external problem, that's when David takes his focus and he turns his attention to the internal problem. Look at verse 7. Bring my soul out of prison, that I may praise your name. The righteous shall surround me, for you shall deal bountifully with me. David realized that whether he was depressed or not, the external issue wasn't going anywhere right now. That's going to remain the same. I'm still going to be in a cave, and I'm still going to have people hunting me down, and that's just the reality right now. So whether I cheer up or whether I stay depressed, that problem's going to stay here for right now. I can't do anything about that. So he asked God to help him through the external issues. Go with me through this, because I know it's going to be here. I just want you to be with me when we go through this. And then he turns his focus to his soul. There were two issues going on at the same time. One was circumstantial. Things happen, and they're not always good. That's just life. That's just life. That's true for everything. Sometimes bad things happen. Sometimes we're forced to stay in those situations a whole lot longer than we want to. Maybe you're in one right now. Like, I'm still here, and I don't like it, and it's still happening, and I can pretend it's all good, and everything's happy-go-lucky, but it's still there. Sometimes we're there for a long time. But the circumstantial problems have a tendency to sentence our soul to a deeper prison if we'll allow it to do so. We look at our external, and then our soul ends up going into a deeper prison. David recognized that he was being held in two prisons at the same time. One he was going to have to wait out, and the other one he was going to go ahead and walk out of. I don't have to stay in the other one. I might have to sit in the cave for a minute, but I don't have to have my soul locked up in prison while I'm in here. He might have been stuck in a pretty bad situation, but he didn't want his soul to be held captive too. I might have to stay here, but my soul does not have to stay here. My soul does not have to be locked in a prison. So he started looking at what God had done for him, and he chose praise instead. I'm going to praise you. Instead of looking around me, I'm going to start praising you. He wasn't looking around anymore. He was looking ahead. He was looking at something ahead instead of everything that's surrounding him. I want to mention one other guy who was in an extremely bad scenario before I close today. Jesus Christ was standing in a courtyard listening to what was about to happen to him. He was standing there convicted of a crime he did not commit. His external problem was pretty big. He was accused of something even though he was innocent, just like David, just like Joseph. He's surrounded by people who hate him, and he's listening to the conversations going on around him about what's about to happen to his body. He was about to be beaten and then crucified, and he's listening to these conversations. But I want you to see what he chose to focus on in the middle of all of that. Imagine standing there listening to what they are about to do to you in his situation. It's about to get really bad. My external problem is about to get huge. But look at his focus. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For the joy that was set before him. That's you. That's you. It says, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. You were the joy that was set before him. He was able to go through the most difficult task because he was focused on you, the joy that was set before him. Have you ever stopped to look at it that way? Are you going to make it through this, Jesus? I'm going to make it through. What are you focused on? Her. Him. That's the joy that's set before me. I go through this and I get a relationship with them. Let's get through this. Let's get through this. Because there's joy set before me. Every strike of the whip was okay because he had a chance to be with you. Let's make it real for a second. Every time they took that whip and took flesh off of his body, we can go one more. Why? Because I get to be with them. For the joy that's set before me, I will endure the cross. With every open wound, he stayed focused on being together with you. That's incredible. That's incredible. Jesus would not allow his soul to be locked in prison. His external situation might be bad, but my soul it's in a woohoo moment. I am so excited about what's coming after this. I get to have a relationship with that guy. I get to have a relationship with her. There's so much joy after this. So every new wound that happened to his body, he focused on you. His soul was not going to be put in prison. He kept his focus on the joy that was set before him. So let's take a second and let's flip the script. Let's just flip it around for a second. When you are placed in circumstantial prison, where is your joy? You might be going through it right now. I don't know. But while you are in a circumstantial prison, the things around you are bad. Where is your joy? Do you allow your soul to be placed in that deeper prison while you're going through the hard times? Do you allow your soul to get locked up too? When David realized that this was happening, he asked God to bring his soul out of prison. Get my soul out. I know I'm stuck, but my soul doesn't have to be in prison right now. Help my soul get out of prison. So where's your joy when you're going through dark times? Let's flip it all around here. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 19. For what is our hope or joy or crown of rejoicing? Is it not even you in the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ at his coming? While Jesus was suffering, his mind was set on the joy that was set before him. When you're going through hardships, set your mind on the joy that is set before you. Isn't our joy the thought of us in the presence of Jesus at his coming? So no matter what you're going through right now, when you get out on the other side, you still get him. You still get to be with him. No matter what life throws your way, you still get him. And I get to be in a presence of Jesus. He is coming back, and I'm going to be with him no matter what I'm going through right now. Do you find a little bit of joy there? Can you find a little bit in that thought right there? Life can throw the most evil, heart-wrenching scenarios your way, but our soul does not have to go to prison during those times. Your soul doesn't have to go. For the joy that is set before you, endure. Endure. Let the world wonder how you get through those rough patches with joy. How do you do it? I know it's a rough thing you're going through. Why are you still kind? And why are you still showing grace? And why are you still forgiving those who have wronged you? And why are you still able to smile and still able to love when you're going through what you're going through? Let them know that even if you lose everything, you still win. You still win because there is a joy that is set before you. Jesus said, in this world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. all of those scenarios, I've overcome those. Don't let your soul sit in that prison. Focus on the joy that's set before you. Just like Jesus focused on the joy that was set before him. You. Like, yeah, it's got to mean something else. No, it's you. It's you. You are the joy that was set before Jesus, and he focused on you and made it through. So when you're going through a rough time, don't let your soul be locked up in a prison because of the experience that you're going through. Set your mind on the joy that's set before you. You still get him. And if you lose everything in this life, there's one thing that cannot be taken away. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. And when he returns, you get to be in his presence. Focus on the joy that is set before you. Don't let your soul be locked in a deeper prison.